So we're going to try to connect together a few things tonight. We'll start from a question that bothers people often in the Parsha. How could Avraham Avinu daven for the people of Sodom? Okay, that's our first problem. They were ra'im v'chatoim l'Hashem ma'od. They were evil people. They did evil things. When you look in the Midrashim, they did terrible things. And this is the question, right? How could it be? The Shem Yishmo phrase that Hayitochen shivakesh Avram rachamim al asdomim b'makom hezek kol ha'olam. These people were a danger to the entire world. How can you daven for rachamim for them, for mercy for them, when they endanger the whole world? And the famous statement is, a person who is merachem al ha'achzorim, a person who has mercy on the cruel, is really being achzor al rachmanim. You're being cruel to the merciful. That's not a kindness to be merciful on them. So, and he quotes the Ramban, who says that when a person must be stopped in order to protect others, that is a mitzvah, even though you're doing an act of killing a person. So he explains like this. He says, Avraham Avinu, by davening for them, it wasn't let Hashem, leave them alone, let them continue torturing and doing all the terrible things to people. Avraham Avinu was using that as a way to try to change them, to transform them, to somehow separate them from their evil. Because he said that was Avraham Avinu's way. He said, if you can awaken the midah of rachamim on them, so then the sense of rachamim, which they had totally destroyed, that human sense of mercy, that a person has a mercy on another's suffering, that would maybe be able to awaken in them again. And maybe they would stop being so evil. And he says, with this we can explain Avraham Avinu's little introduction to Hashem before he davened for the people of Sodom. He said, Hine no ha'alti l'daber al Hashem, I'm coming to begin to speak to Hashem, v'anochi ofar v'efer, and I am dust and ashes. What's that? In other words, he says, it doesn't make that much sense as an introduction, because what if you tell Hashem, I'm gold and silver? In other words, relative to Hashem, everything is meaningless. You say, I'm just dust and ashes. So what, if you were gold and silver, then you could talk to Hashem? Right? It's not there. So that's why Rashi brings the Perush. He says, dust, I should have been dust in my war with the kings. I was totally outnumbered when I went to the war to try and save Lot from his captivity. I should have been Afer, I should have been ashes when Nimrod threw me into the furnace in Ur Kasdim. And Hashem, you had mercy on me. Why is he giving that as the introduction? Because in Avram's humility, he was so humble, he said to Hashem, Ribono Shalom, they're really bad, but look, you had mercy on me, and that really helped me turn over a new leaf. That helped me become a good person. If you'll have mercy on them, maybe that will awaken something in them, just like it did for me, and you'll be able to help. Okay? A very interesting approach to a very difficult question. But now, we take it to another level. Obviously, Avram's tefillah was not answered in that way. Right? They did not have the ability. That was not a path that could be taken. And now it was time for the destruction of Sodom. Okay, now the destruction of Sodom was done by a malach, right? These three travelers that Avraham Avinu saw were malachim, and they each had, as Rashi explained, specific tasks. One was to tell Avraham Avinu that he was going to have a son. One was to heal Lot and to rescue him from Sodom, and one was to destroy Sodom. Now, the Kli Yakar asks, wait a second, why does the one whose assignment is to destroy Sodom have to come to Avram's house? Right? In other words, the one who has to, deal with Avram and deal with Lot and all these things, that's coming to Avraham Avinu. That was all the connection. But here his assignment was to destroy Sodom. So don't start stopping off at Avram's house for the barbecue. Right? Go straight to Sodom and do what you have to do. So here we find a fascinating approach. We find it in the Shem Shmuel also, and also in some other sources. Let's start Which one should we start from? Let's start from here. Sorry. Yeah. So he starts off by saying, jumping ahead, when the Malachim come to Lot and they say, get your daughters, get your sons-in-law, right? Get out of town because it's all going to blow up. And they thought he was kidding. Yeah, good one, right? He said, the Kli Yakar asked, why would they think he's kidding? They just saw what happened, that the whole town was struck blind supernaturally when they tried to break into Lot's house. So if Lot says, these people here, these malachim, they say, we got to go, it's going to be destroyed, why? So again, he takes it to a higher level. We're not just talking about some bumpkins in Sodom, these sons-in-law. It says, Lot used a lashon where he used the name of Rachamim, right? Where he says, Ki mashchis Hashem, Yudke Vovke. Hashem is going to destroy the city. But that name of Hashem is the name of Rachamim. They said, why are you saying, how could it be that a force of Rachamim, a force of mercy, is going to come and destroy the city? But what they didn't understand is what Chazal say is that Rishoyim transform the midah of Rachamim into din. The midah of mercy gets transformed into din. Now, when we see that brought down, we tend to think it like gets switched out or just totally transformed. But as we're going to see, it still maintains its identity as the midah of Rachamim, but its expression is one of din. Let's explain. He brings a mashal. He says, Rachamim can change into a very forceful anger. Mercy can turn into this powerful force of anger, roges. If you imagine a father has great mercy on his child, and his child needs food very badly, and the father has gathered together food, and he's trying to get it to his child, and then a man comes, and he stops him. He blocks the way to his son's house. He's not letting him get the food that his son so badly needs. He says then the father is filled with roges, which is this type of angry energy, but it's coming from the deep mercy that he has on his son. He feels his son's need, he feels his son's suffering, he loves his son. And then when something stands in the way, that becomes unleashed. That very power of Rachamim becomes unleashed as this roges. And he said the more Rachamim the father has, the more mercy the father has, then the more powerful Yigdal Yosa roges alzeh. He says that's exactly it. Hashem's name of Rachamim, Hashem's name of mercy wants to give. The Rishoyim, those people who do evil in the world, they block that. They create a roadblock in front of that Shefa, not letting Hashem's Tova come into the world. And therefore it is the power of Rachamim that actually comes to destroy that evil. That's an expression of the power of Rachamim. I'll tell you where this got me thinking just a little bit. Unfortunately, we've all heard part, and I'm sure all of us have only heard part of the terrible cruelty and the atrocities that the enemies have done recently. And while Jews know how to fight and fight when they have to, we can't imagine our people doing anything like that. We can't imagine that. And that can end up, if a person thinks about it, getting us a little dispirited. Meaning, if we can't be as cruel and evil as they are, so does that mean they're stronger? Right? I heard a story once about a Jew who after the concentration camps, he ended up in a DP camp, displaced persons camp in Germany. And they weren't locked into these DP camps, they were just given a place to live because they had no place to go. And he walked out into a German street. And there was a German woman there pushing her baby in a carriage. And the baby had a roll, piece of bread. So the man grabbed the bread and the baby started to cry. And he stopped for a second and he gave it back. And someone who was watching that said, "You Jews don't even know how to take revenge." It's like, you can't even do that. Make the baby cry, take his bread. Look at what they did to you. Look what they did to your family. So does that mean that we're weak? No. Our strength comes from a different place. The power that we unleash by bringing chesed and rachamim into the world is much more powerful than the power that those who were cruel and evil have. So he explains like this. He says the people of Sodom were the exact opposite of Avraham Avinu. They didn't want to share with anyone. They didn't want chesed in the world. They wanted to uproot chesed entirely. So therefore, he says, since they were in opposition to the midah of chesed, so then it was the midah of chesed itself that rose up against them. And that's a very strong power. And it was Avraham Avinu's chesed that rose up against them. His chesed, because Avraham Avinu became an entire entity of chesed. Right, I saw that the Siva Shalom described him as a Beis HaYotzer of chesed. He was a factory of chesed. And his chesed, even when he was doing it locally, it was bringing and transmitting chesed into the entire world. So therefore, when they tried to block that process, then that destroyed them entirely. He says the Ramban asked, there were other nations who were even worse than the Sodomim, right? But he says the Sodomim were in Eretz Yisrael, okay? And all the shefa in the world comes to Eretz Yisrael. This is where Hashem's chesed gets transmitted into the world. So therefore, when they stood against that chesed in Eretz Yisrael, so then this force was unleashed against them. You have to realize it was like an atom bomb. It wasn't just smiting them down with some kind of flood or this or anything. Everything was entirely destroyed and remaining that way for a long time. He says, so now we can understand why the Malach, who was supposed to destroy Sodom, also came to the house of Avraham Avinu. Why, right? That question of the Kli Yaakov, Ma haya lo shama? What did he have to do there? He says, no, because he was coming to get the power that he was going to unleash on Sodom from the chesed of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu there, at that extreme state where he was sick, he was old, he had just had a painful operation. It was the third day of the Milah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it unusually hot. And then he goes out running to do this chesed. You know, we look at the story and say, okay, that's nice, but it's a localized thing for a few people. That was just an expression of the huge force of chesed that it was Avraham Avinu, that he was the midah of chesed. So therefore, that malach drew that power from Avraham Avinu, and that was the power that was unleashed. So therefore, right, that looking at the Jewish people, oh, you people can't stand up to such evil, cruel people because you're people of chesed, you're people who are too nice, you're people who have mercy. If they mess with our chesed and mercy, they're messing with Hashem's chesed and mercy. And that's a huge power. Rav Wolbe says, right, the Gemara tells the story of Rabbi Shmuel, Kohen Gadol, and right, as Avram Fried sings it for us, right, and Hashem says, Yishmael b'ni barcheni. Yes, Rabbi Shmuel, Kohen Gadol for a bracha. And the essence, one of the key phrases in the bracha is, Yogolu rachamecha al midosecha. That your rachamim, your mercy, should wash over like a wave. Okay, it's hard to have a word for it in English. A gal, we know, is a wave in the ocean. Yogolu rachamecha al midosecha means even if Am Yisrael are undeserving, your mercy should come like a wave that washes away all the other midos, all the other attributes. Rav Wolbe said, think about that image. If you've ever seen the power of rushing water. Okay, water is really a pretty gentle type of thing. You can dabble your feet in it, right? You can do all these things, right? But when water is unleashed, right, in a flash flood or in a huge waterfall or in something like that, nothing can stand in its way. He says, Rachamim is that powerful. And that's why he says when someone's bothering you, right, he says, and you want to be strong, being strong means activating your midah of rachamim and letting that be primary. That's our picture of a strong Jew, of one who has rachamim. But to realize that the achzorim, right, Rav Wolbe says the word achzor is made up of two words, achzor, totally foreign, because the thing that enables a person to be cruel is when you're totally isolated from this person. The person's crying, pain, suffering, doesn't affect me at all, right? So that, when that comes to face rachamim, that wave of rachamim that can bring so much rachamim, causes the cruelty to be destroyed and to disappear. Okay, now he brings just this also interesting, why Davka from the get-go it was a malach of rachamim and not a malach, so to speak, of cruelty, because he says this was part of Eretz Yisrael. And even though these people were so evil, ha'aretz ma'chata. So he says, it's true. He says, even though this part of Eretz Yisrael did this, and when Am Yisrael went into Golus also, it says, Gosris v'melach sreifo kol arzo, it says, Eretz Yisrael is going to become desolate like Sdom and Amorah as well. But the Novi says that it's going to come back. Okay, there's in Yechezkel, it says, V'shavti eshvitza, so eshvus Sdom uv'nosel. Sdom and the suburbs of Sdom, suburban Sdom, is going to be resettled. Obviously not by the Sdom people, right, but by us. It's part of Eretz Yisrael. Right now, it's like that Dead Sea area. There's not much you can do there. I mean, hotels and the mineral industry and such. Okay, so he says that this is something that's going to return, and that's why there had to be, that was also an aspect of the Rachamim that was there in the destruction. It was a huge destruction, but there was a kernel of Rachamim that for the land and for what it will be for Eretz Yisrael that will be expressed in the future. Now, let's look at someone else who spoke on a similar theme. Really, Kadosh Baruch Hu helped me find from Sefer to Sefer as I'm looking. Okay, so again, the same question of, this was from Rav Yitzchak of Radvil. Rav Yitzchak of Radvil was one of the sons of the Maggid of Zlotchever, Michal Zlotchever. And he said, why did the Malach have to come to Avraham Avinu's house? Right? He had no shlichus to Avram. So again, he explains, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world with a certain balance of forces. What's called Zeh Le'umah Zeh Asa Elokim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created one force, but an opposing force. There's a Yetzer Tov, there's a Yetzer Ra, etc. There's Yaakov and Esav. And that means that there's always a seesaw relationship. Is that a symbiotic relationship? I forget what that's called. When one goes up, one goes down. Inverse. Okay, right, that's good, right? Like you imagine, like even with Yaakov and Esav, right? They were twins, right? Twins sometimes, one twin in the womb thrives and the other one doesn't because one is somehow getting more of the food. Or even if you and your neighbor get your water from the same source and you're taking a shower every Shabbos and suddenly it's going down to a trickle because your neighbor's taking a shower, so you turn the tap, he turns the tap, right? But one's going to get more, one's going to get less. So it is with these powers, okay? So he said, right, and this is described with the relationship of Eretz Yisrael and Rome, Am Yisrael and Rome, that one will be up, one will be down. So he says, Avraham Avinu was the tachlis of Nedivos. Avraham Avinu was the tachlis of giving and chesed to everyone in the world, especially with this mitzvah of achnasas orchim. The people of Sdom were the exact opposite. Achnasas orchim was that greatest crime which was there. So he says, and this affected everything in Avraham Avinu's personality. So the Malach who came, he says, was born from the midah of the chesed and the mitzvahs of the achnasas orchim of Avram. This is an interesting, different twist on the phrasing. It wasn't just that he kind of came to fill up his gas tank by Avram. This malach was created by the chesed and achnasas orchim of Avram, and this achnasas orchim, which was done under these conditions, that were insane conditions, where Avraham Avinu was sick and old and had the bris milah and it was hot and it was all these things. And he was looking for Achim, and he ran after them, and he ran to do the things, and even the menu. I mean, imagine you came to somebody's house, would you like to join us for supper? He says, okay, we're having tongue and mustard. Oh, that sounds nice. And then he like shechts 3 cows, right, and takes out the tongues, and it's like, that's a bit much, but it was giving all and everything that he can. So therefore he said, Al Yedei Pe'ula Zu Holides HaMalach Shebo La'afach Sdom. That gave birth to this malach that came to overturn Sdom, which was the Hepech Ad Midazu. Okay, so this is a very important thing for us to remember. Again, I'm not sticking my head in big topics. I did hear something from Rav David Yosef Shlita, son of Rav Ovadia, that resonated with me. That's a good way they like to say things nowadays. He said he hears people screaming nekama, right, wanting revenge. Now he says that gets him a bit worried because we say kel nekamas Hashem. Hashem, right, dam avodav yikom, we say it in Avraham, Hashem will avenge the blood of Am Yisrael. That, he says, is the department of Hashem. But if people get worked up with revenge, you can make mistakes, right? You can lose your cool-headedness that's needed at different times. And he says our task now is not really in that realm of the revenge so much as habola hargacha hashkim v'harago. That which is coming to destroy you, you must go first and destroy it. You are going to destroy a harmful force in the world. You're going to destroy evil. So again, does that make us weaker than if, we wanted to go and do exactly what they did to them to do to us? No. If we did that, we would be weaker. The fact that we remain who we are, even though we do what we have to, right? And it's, as he said, if you're merachim on the achzarim, if you will be merciful on the cruel, you're going to end up being cruel on the rachmanim. You'll be cruel to the merciful. You must do what you have to, and like the Rambam says in the halachas of war, the soldier has to focus, he has to not think even of his family and anything that could distract him from it, and just to focus on that task which is there, and it's a milchemes mitzvah, and it must be done. But to understand also that, sometimes it looks, people on one hand that praise the beautiful acts of chesed that have come out now in Am Yisrael in an incredible way. Right, a friend of mine, Rav Amos Luban, wonderful Talmud Chacham, he said in the idea of the zel umazeh, here there was an expression of such pure raw evil that came out. So just as we know when there's an expression of kedusha, there's an oppositional force of tumah that's awakened. So too, when such evil came out, there was an oppositional force of good that was awakened in people. A force of chesed, a force of rachamim, a force of achdus, a force of self-sacrifice. These are all these things that came out. And people say, okay, well, that's nice. It should be a zchus for us in the war. It should give us a merit in the war. We underestimate the power of those things. And what Avraham Avinu showed us is that it doesn't have to be with huge numbers. When one person does a chesed for another person with heart and soul, when one person has mercy on another person with heart and soul, you've awakened a huge force that no force of evil can stand against. And the more we focus on that and on that avoda, that will give strength to everyone that has to fight in the front. That'll weaken all those forces, because when we awaken chesed and rachamim, that awakens the midah above. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to send chesed and rachamim in the world. And then if in the way of that chesed and rachamim is standing evil and cruelty, that gal, that wave comes and washes it away. It's hofech, it's an incredible power. So we really shouldn't underestimate it. There's an expression that we find in Mishlei that many people say it Friday night, the Suda Eshes Chayil. Right? And, usually in the benchers, if they have illustrations, they have a picture of a nice mommy lighting candles, with her apron on and things. And we find a similar expression for Boaz. He's called an Ish Chayil. Okay, but how does that fit? They translate woman of valor, right? And okay, she makes challahs and she benches. It's nice, but so I heard personally from Victor Miller once. I was at a shir, and he said, people don't have the picture right. He said that Eshes Chayil is a warrior. By the things she's doing, she wields tremendous power, and she's a fighter. Boaz, who was described as an Ish Chayil, not that he was necessarily a soldier, but by his chesed was revealed there. He said that is a person who is active, who is proactive, who does good. She gives people good, not bad. She's a warrior woman. She's a hero, because that brings those forces into the world. So it's important to realize that we're all in the front. And oftentimes we have battles day in, day out where we're tested, right? That we're tempted to be cruel. We don't want to have mercy or chesed. We want to lash out in anger. All these things are part of the battlefront. And a huge part of our war effort, so to speak, is to bring out those powers of chesed and rachamim, to create those malochim of chesed and rachamim, which again, their primary purpose is to bring chesed and rachamim to the whole world. And Avraham Avinu wanted the people of Sodom to drop it, right? To just say no to sadism and cruelty and all these things. Just say no, they couldn't do it. But that is what we would want, right? Am Yisrael wants to bring bracha and shefa to the entire world. On Sukkot, we read the karbonos, right? There are 70 karbonos that correspond to the 70 nations of the world, and they're there in descending order, right? And Rashi says this is because the nations of the world are eventually going to dwindle and disappear. On the other hand, they also said that when we bring the karbonos, it brings blessing to the nations of the world. So which is it? How is it? So I heard this from Yitzhak Breitowitz, I forget who was quoting, he says that's exactly it. Their evil and their opposition is going to dwindle by our avoda, and then they'll be able to receive bracha. Because we do see that our picture eventually is going to be, right, to remove the idolatry. Right, that the world will be set with Hashem's malchus, and all flesh, all people who live, Yiku b'shmecha, will come and call in your name. Okay, that is our picture. Our picture is not wiping out everyone, and as the Rambam also says, we don't think for Yemos Hashem Mashiach because we just want to rule over everyone and use our power for everyone. We want to be able to feel what we're supposed to do and to bring the world with bracha. But don't think that that's, forgive the expression, wimpy. That's incredibly powerful. That's an expression of the most powerful force in the world. And if we stay on point and remember who we are and live it day to day, then no force of cruelty and evil will be able to stand up to that. That's what we learned from Avraham Avinu, and that's Mogen Avram, the shield of Avram that's with us to this day. Have a wonderful evening.